Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, I'll be going over all the movies that I watched in the month of August. Now, I watched a lot of movies in the month of August, mainly because I took like 3 weeks off work and I was also under lockdown due to, you know, pandemic situation, and so I literally had nowhere else to go. Nowhere. Aside from grocery shopping and walking my dog, I didn't do anything outside of my house, and so I had plenty of time to read and watch a lot of movies and shows. I think on the reading department I kind of failed a little bit. I'm bitter about it and I wish I had read more. Anyway, like I said, I watched a lot of things. I decided to split up my movie wrap up. So I watched a lot of horror movies and I will be doing a separate horror movie wrap up for the month of August in another video. But in today's video, I'm gonna go over all the other things that I watched aside from horror movies. So without further ado, let's get straight into all the movies aside from horror that I watched in the month of August. So before I get started, you know, due to our lockdown, I can't even get my bubble tea. I mean, I guess I could Uber it, but I don't trust the workers at the local bubble tea place. They may be infected. So I just bought a bubble tea kit and decided to make my own lychee green tea. If you can see, I even bought the little jellies, the lychee jellies. Let's see how it compares. Oh, this is nice. Wow, I feel like I can open up my own bubble tea place. That is nice. I need to move on with this video. I started off August with a little bit of a low start in terms of movies. The first movie that I watched in the month of August was High Life. This is kind of like an indie sci-fi movie. It's directed by Claire Denis and it was released back in 2018. This stars Robert Pattinson as the main character. The setting is kind of aloof of what's happening really on this spaceship. So it is, like I said, a sci-fi movie. It's set in outer space on a spaceship. It's full of criminals. I believe everyone on this spaceship had like a death sentence in prison. So they either had an option to, you know, be executed or to go on the ship and kind of explore outer space. Or like, I don't know. I don't actually know. What the hell is with this concept? I'm just gonna read the synopsis on Letterboxd because I'm struggling here. Oblivion awaits. Monty and his baby daughter are the last survivors of a damned and dangerous mission to the outer reaches of the solar system. They must now rely on each other to survive as they hurtle towards the oblivion of a black hole. Now, this one is weird. Like I said, it's kind of like indie sci-fi. At the beginning, I thought it was going to be very touching, like a moving kind of touching sci-fi on this kind of bleak journey into the unknown, oblivion as they say on this description. And I thought that this was going to be more of a sweet story between a father and a daughter on this spaceship. It's actually so weird and not in a good way. Like, you know, in the month of July, I was into a lot of the weird movies. This ain't it. There were a lot of like interesting and beautiful kind of visuals throughout the movie, but I will say that it gets strange real quick. The mission is kind of unknown. I suppose these prisoners were kind of sent there as like an experiment kind of thing, just to see what happens and like collect data, but it's strange. It's on a ship of prisoners with no guards, so they're like kind of free to do whatever they want really, but they do have a structure at the beginning. There is kind of like this doctor on the ship. It seems like she's kind of in control, but one thing leads to another. It's kind of revealed at the beginning. Monty and his baby daughter are like the only ones on board, and so like the mystery kind of unravels of what happened to all the members on this ship. It gets a little bizarre and crazy. It's kind of a little bit disturbing. Let me just say, trigger warnings for like sexual violence. It's kind of like icky in the way that they portray sexual things in the movie, and it's just very uncomfortable. That kind of element kind of brought it down a lot. I had expectations that this was going to be like a beautiful kind of story about this father on this long journey, this kind of doomed journey into space, and I didn't get that. I got like this weird kind of, I think it's because like the dynamic was weird to begin with. I didn't like the unsettling kind of tension, and like I said, there were some like aggressively graphic scenes. The one thing that really was off-putting for me is that there was two kind of assault scenes, I should say, and one was viewed in a very negative, kind of violent, aggressive way where you're supposed to feel like, oh, that's so gross. And then there is another assault scene, but it's kind of portrayed in more of a positive way, and this one is like a female kind of assaulting a male on the ship, and it was just like, I didn't get good vibes. I do not recommend this movie, but if you do end up watching it, you know what I mean. It is disturbing. It's gross. It's just, yeah, I don't want to really elaborate on it, but I was severely disappointed because I had expectations at the beginning. I had no idea what it was really about. I just got a feeling it had like an indie sci-fi vibe, and I really liked it. It kind of looked a little bit retro. It had everything that appealed to me, but was executed in a way that was so offensive and just like not up my alley. This one was just like disturbing things, uninteresting characters, and also like it kind of didn't really make sense and tried to be a lot more philosophical, but it really didn't work. I will say some of the visuals are nice though, but aside from that, this one had nothing going for it. I gave it 2 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd and will not recommend. Started off the month pretty bad. The next movie that I watched was F9. Yeah, what can I say about the Fast and the Furious franchise? It has become ridiculous. I know it's kind of like a campy kind of action movie at this point, but it's gone in a direction that really disappoints me as a movie watcher, because I would say that Fast and the Furious was actually really good, like the first like 2 movies. It had like a very cool concept. It was kind of unique at the time, like there wasn't really a lot of movies at least about like car racing and all that. It was a cool like street racing movie. Overall, I don't know, I got a bit of nostalgia with like the Fast and the Furious franchise, at least the earlier movies. I'm just saying it now, F9 is like so ridiculous. It's kind of borderline offensive to me. It's very over the top. It almost feels like it's dumbing down the film for very like immature audiences. This sounds very negative, but I mean, at this point, everyone who works on the Fast and the Furious movies are getting paid like top dollar, so they don't really care about my, you know, criticism on this movie, but I would highly not recommend F9. The franchise has gotten to a point where they just don't care. They just want to one-up every movie of the craziness that's in it, and it's just ridiculous. It's over the top. It doesn't make sense anymore. It defies like the laws of physics. It's just a dumb action movie at this point, and I'm not really on board with it anymore. I hope that they don't make any more in this franchise, even though I know that they're going to continue on with this, probably make spin-off movies, because it earns so much money in the box office. So I'm actually slightly upset at the direction that this franchise took. So this movie was directed by Justin Lin. It obviously is a 2021 release, as it has been kind of delayed in 2020. I gave F9 2 stars out of 5. Not a good start indeed to the month. However, the third movie that I watched, oh my gosh. I don't know if it's because of the 2 crappy movies that I started off with. This movie that I'm about to mention is just my favorite. I honestly think it's gonna be one of my favorite movies for this year. It is so beautifully filmed. It's so poetic. It's so subtle, but also has this... Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. The movie is Pig. This is the latest Nicolas Cage movie. It came out this year. I'm obsessed with this movie. It's so beautiful. This is directed by Michael Sarnoski. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Basically, Pig follows this man who's a recluse. He's a bit of a hermit, lives out in the woods by himself with a pig, a truffle pig. He's also a truffle hunter. I think every week there's a man that comes to collect and kind of pays him out for like the truffle work that he does. And honestly, I don't need to really say more about it because I went into this movie not knowing much about it. He's a truffle hunter. He lives in the wild. One day his beautiful truffle pig gets stolen, and then obviously upset, he goes back into like civilization to find out who took his truffle pig, and he wants his damn truffle pig back. And let me just say that this movie for some reason was compared to John Wick. You're gonna be disappointed if you're gonna compare it to John Wick, because that is a completely different sort of movie. I don't know why it was compared to John Wick. It's totally not that movie. Please don't go into this movie thinking it's John Wick. There isn't much more that I want to say. It does kind of go into like the chef's scene. What do you even call that? Even though this guy who's played by Nicolas Cage, he looks kind of like a bum. He's all like dirty and stuff throughout the movie, and he seems like he's got more of a reputation than he leads on. And so I won't say more than that, but this movie is such an emotional journey. It's so beautiful and poetic, like I said. It's just a movie that's very subtle in its execution, but it has impact and it's so beautifully filmed. I love Nicolas Cage. I love his like craziness, but in this movie he's toned himself down. He's kind of stern throughout the movie. He's kind of very serious, looks very angry throughout the whole movie, but it kind of makes sense for the character he's playing. There's no Cage crazy in this movie, which I also appreciated because it doesn't seem like a movie that should have that sort of element to it. I mean, you know, last month I watched Vampire's Kiss and was absolutely obsessed with it, even though I knew it was a bad movie. This one is such a good movie. Pig, if you're gonna watch any movie, you're gonna have to watch Pig. Pig is so good. It was shot so beautifully. It was just acted so flawlessly. It kind of explores more mature themes. It's just so beautiful and I loved it. How it all like culminates to this climactic moment is also executed in a way that's so raw and so beautifully realistic and just so emotionally impacting. It's just very, like I said, subtle, but it's just so beautiful, and I just love how it ended, even though it kind of made me a little bit sad, but also I was like, this is such an iconic movie, and I'm so sad that it kind of feels like it's gone under the radar a little bit. But Pig, guys, if I recommend anything on this month's movie list, it would be Pig. One of my favorites, like I said. Flawless. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know, I kind of want to give it 5, but I ended up going for a 4. It could be a 5. I'm a little confused with myself, but it is so good. It is such a good movie. Nicolas Cage was so good. Oh my gosh, he is back, baby. I really hope that he does more films like this in the future instead of doing like weirdo films. I mean, I won't judge him because I will watch anything that Nick Cage is in. Yeah, I kind of appreciate that he's finally kind of in a good movie. I mean that in like recent movies that he's done. Also, it has Alex Wolff. He's kind of like an actor that I really love because he was so good in Hereditary, and he in here is also really good. The emotions that these characters just show on screen is just so captivating. I loved it. Highly recommend. I won't go into too much more details. I think this is one that you should just go into kind of blindly, even though I kind of shared a little bit of what it was about, but there's so much more to it and it's layered, it is deep. I'm obsessed. The next movie that I watched in the month of August was an animated movie. It is a rewatch. One of my favorite animated movies. I mean, I always say this, but this one is truly like, I was obsessed with this movie. It is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Oh my gosh. I don't know how to say this, but this animation style was so inspiring. It was so beautiful. It kind of encapsulated the look of a comic book whilst also doing this cool 3D animation but 2D animation hybrid kind of style. It was so stunning. The plot was just so interesting throughout the movie. It had emotional impact, but it also had humor. It's like an adventure, but it's also like a coming of age story. It has everything. And like the title suggests, it's about the multiverse opening. So you have like different like Spider-Mans coming into the same universe. I know like we're gonna have the multiverse thing going on in the Marvel like cinematic universe, but let's hear it, guys. Sony did it first with Into the Spider-Verse and I'm living for it. I cannot wait because I know that they're working on a sequel to this movie and I can't wait for the sequel, honestly. This movie was so perfect. And like I said, this is a rewatch. So this was directed by Rodney Rothman, Peter Ramsey and Bobby Pachetti. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The struggle of my life. Anyway, this came out in 2018. I didn't get a chance to watch this in the theater. Regrets, but when I watched it for the first time, I immediately rewatched it again straight after I just finished it. It was that good. Oh my gosh, Miles Morales. Oh, He's so precious. The songs are like a bop in this movie. I have rewatched this movie so many times since I initially watched it. I of course gave this a 5-star out of 5 because this is one of my, like I said, one of my favorite animation movies of all time. This year has been really good with all the animation movies that I've been watching. Anyway, loved it, highly recommend. If you haven't seen it already, what are you doing? Go watch it. I'm telling you now. So the next movie that I watched is kind of another sort of whimsical one. It is Big Fish. This came out all the way back in 2003. Whoa, throwback to the, I was gonna say 2000s. Oh yeah, that is correct. The 2000s. What a decade of strange and the bizarre, but this is everything I love when it comes to like magical realism. And of course, this is a Tim Burton movie. You know I love a bit of Tim Burton in my life. I actually really like his style. I know not all his movies are that great, but some of his movies are like iconic, legendary, and his visual style has always been something I was drawn to from like a young age. I loved his aesthetic. And Big Fish, I had never seen it before and I really loved it. It was such a sweet and beautiful story. It was quite simple. Like I said, it is magical realism, so there is that kind of element to it. It follows this character of Edward Bloom, and he's kind of like this strange boy growing up in this town, but he's very talented, he's very well loved, and it's kind of alluded to the fact that he kind of was blessed with this sort of positive life due to this magical fish, the Big Fish. And it basically kind of recounts his story. So at the very beginning of the film, you're kind of in Edward Bloom's life in his sort of end stages, and he's kind of recounting his life in the past to his son, all the wacky experiences that he's had. And it also seems like him and his son have this tumultuous sort of relationship. The son is kind of sick of his dad, to be honest, and he always thinks that his stories are so exaggerated and over the top, which to be fair, it probably somewhat is, but he's a storyteller, so like it's kind of like quirky and cute. The family's there together, they kind of rekindle this relationship once and for all, and it just like goes through this very crazy life story that Edward Bloom has had in his life, and it's just so over the top and so magical, and I loved it. The visuals were stunning. It has almost like this dreamlike quality to it, and I honestly adored this movie. I kind of broke at the end. Like, I was actually very emotional at the end of the movie. Like I said, a lot of the stories are, you know, over the top and dramatized, if you will, but a lot of it kind of rings true, and at the end it kind of like merges what's exaggerated to the realistic angle of everything. Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful and it was so touching, it was so emotional, but it was also very heartwarming and whimsical. So I feel like if you want something that's gonna kind of lift you up, make you feel like happy, I would highly recommend Big Fish. I can't believe I had never seen Big Fish until now, but I ended up giving this one a 4 stars out of 5. Highly recommend if you're looking for something a little bit more lighthearted. Okay, so the next movie that I watched was Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad. This is the new one that came out by James Gunn. This came out in 2021. What can I say? This movie was just insanity, over the top. A lot of things to love about it, but also I wasn't impressed by it in any way, but I definitely loved certain elements of the Suicide Squad. It definitely was like a comic book movie. I mean, if you know James Gunn, you know that he's a bit crazy, so you would expect that in a Suicide Squad movie. And so I liked it, I had fun with it. It wasn't the best movie, but it went all out. It went outside the box. You know, I kind of appreciate the director for doing that, and it was overall a better movie than the original Suicide Squad. In my opinion, it kind of just had a lot of fun with their characters, and it kind of shows. So in turn, I had a lot of fun watching it. I was just kind of along for the ride with these very violent criminals. It definitely had a better group dynamic than the original Suicide Squad, and I kind of felt like I wanted these characters to stay alive and stick together and just be a team. They're a group of like insane criminal like villains, so of course they're not gonna 100% work well together, but I did appreciate kind of like the camaraderie that kind of formed between all the characters towards the end, and I liked it. I would recommend if you do like a bit of wacky comic book kind of movies, but I will say it's not for everyone. It is quite weird. There's no denying that. And I ended up giving it 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. It was kind of average, but I had fun with it. It's also hyper violent, so just forewarning you if you're not, you know, into like very violent movies, I'm just gonna say it now. Suicide Squad is very, very violent. Like over the top kind of violence, but it's a fun time. The next movie that I watched is another heartfelt, emotional, but also a feel-good sort of movie, but also kind of heartbreaking at the same time. My emotions are very confused right now, but it is Minari. I kind of missed out on the hype, you know, in the Korean community. A lot of people were like raving on about it, and I was always interested, but then also like when a movie is so hyped up and I kind of don't watch it. I mean, like the previous year, Parasite was really hyped up, but I had actually watched Parasite like way before like there was any buzz on it, so I kind of was ahead of the game. But for Minari, I was behind the bandwagon, you know, so I kind of was like, okay, this is way too hyped. I ended up watching it in the month of August and I loved it. It was so pure, it was so raw, it was very realistic. This would be so relatable to anyone who's like second-gen immigrants. It's just so beautiful the way this was filmed. It was just so pure because it's kind of following the perspective of a little boy, because this is following like a Korean family who's recently migrated to the Western world. It was very relatable, and a lot of like little quirky things that people do in a Korean household just ring so true, and I kind of understand why so many people loved it, especially in like the Korean community, because it's like very relatable for, you know, people like me who have like parents who have migrated to a Western country and had to, you know, go through some hardships to support their family. It just rings very true and it's quite emotional. I don't think you have to be like a Korean immigrant to get this, but I think a lot of immigrant families can really relate to it and kind of be moved by this movie. And so I think that Minari was actually a beautiful movie, and I shouldn't have been so scared about the hype. This is kind of funny, but I made an order from A24, like the shop, and I bought like a Minari shirt, and let me just say, I love that shirt so much. It's just so cute, and it just brings me joy. I feel like when I wear it and someone sees it and they get it, they get it. Like I said, it's a beautiful movie, totally recommend it. It's so heartwarming, so uplifting, so positive, but also goes through the hardships and the journey that immigrant families go through. It is quite an emotional watch at times, and I think it does hit home and rings true on a lot of like the emotional beats in the movie. But at the end of the day, it was a more positive and happy, feel-good watch. This was directed by Isaac Chung Lee. This movie is set in the 80s, and apparently it was very inspired by this director's upbringing. And like I said, it's kind of following this family. The dad kind of wants to build this farm on this property that they own. They're all struggling for money. They basically essentially live in like a what do you even call it? Like a...
I meant to say a trailer house?
I don't know, like a caravan. It's just a struggle town for this family. But you know what gets them through the tough times is their bond together. And although most of the time, like, you know, things are rocky in their relationship with each other, oh my gosh, love this family, love this movie. I feel like in the month of July, I was going through a weird phase, but in the month of August, I was going for the movies that make you feel warm and fluffy inside. Although I did watch a lot of horror movies, but you know, we won't talk about the horror movies in this video, but it's coming. Anyway, I adored Minari, highly recommend, like I said, and I ended up giving it a 4-star out of 5, and yeah, highly recommend. The last movie that I watched in the month of August, it most definitely didn't finish off with a bang. The month kind of fizzled out again with a movie that's kind of like a blockbustery movie that was a little disappointing, I should say. I honestly don't know why I watched it. I knew that this movie wasn't going to be that great, but oh well. I wanted to watch an action movie. What can you say? It's Snake Eyes, G.I. Joe, Origins. I'm kind of disappointed in myself. Anyway, this is a movie that came out this year. It stars, what's his name? Henry Golding. Come on, iconic, beautiful man. And it was directed by Robert Shenwedke. I'm not gonna attempt to pronounce that name ever again. Basically, this is a G.I. Joe movie. I think this movie did have potential. They had like a few martial artists like in this movie, and I was like really proud when it was revealed because I had no idea who was actually in this movie. But when I saw some of the people that were in it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's him. I actually was really excited once I knew that they had these martial artists in on this project, but the action scenes are so disappointing. They had potential for amazing action sequences. Too bad that the camera was shaky AF. Like how the camera was held throughout all the action sequences are so disappointing. Camera was shaking all over the place. I heard about this complaint and I thought it can't be that bad, but when I watched it, yeah, it's pretty bad. And like the movie itself didn't have much going for it, so at least it should have had really good action sequences, and it was completely ruined because of how the camera was handled, and I did not appreciate it. I went into this movie just wanting dumb fun action. I didn't get it. I mean, we did have action, but it was kind of played over the top and lackluster to say the least. It had a good concept. It kind of had like this gangster vibe to it at the beginning. I really appreciated that, and I was really looking forward to this kind of underbelly kind of feel. So I was actually really looking forward to it. At the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. It's kind of like a crime mob gangster movie, and boy was I wrong. It got cartoonish and kind of over the top real quick. So I ended up giving it 2 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. Don't really recommend it. That is it, guys. Those are the movies that I watched in the month of August. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have you watched any of the movies that I mentioned in this video? If so, let me know what you think about these movies in the comments down below and can have a discussion. Otherwise, I will be coming with another video going over all the horror movies that I watched in the month of August. I actually can't wait to talk about some of the horror movies that I watched. I had a real fun time. I can't wait to talk about it. So stay tuned for the horror movie wrap up. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys are all staying safe and sound, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!